So let's come back to looking at what happened during the Passover feast when Jesus washed his disciples' feet. John chapter 13, verse 1. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, he knew it. He understood these things. Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of the world unto the Father. Having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, says that supper was ended here, in verse 2. Supper being ended, and the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God. So he knew that. He rose from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. After that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. He rose from supper. And in verse 2 it says, and supper being ended. So in the book of John it sounds like Jesus instituted washing the feet of each other as a ceremony after supper was ended. After they had had the grape juice, the pure wine, and the bread. So, let's look at some things about Passover. Numbers chapter 9, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. Who was it that spoke about the institutions of the Passover and other ceremonies? It was the Lord. It was God. By directly speaking to Moses. In verse 2. Let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season. In the 14th day of this month at even. So verse 3 says the Passover began in the 14th day of this month. That's the first month. You look up to verse 1. At even, as the sun set, ye shall keep it in his appointed season according to all the rites of it, and according to all the ceremonies thereof shall you keep it. Verse 5. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even in the wilderness of Sinai. According to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did the children of Israel. But there was something that happened at this time. Verse 6, there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep this Passover on that day, and they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. So they were helping out in the rites of preparing the body of someone who died and whatever happened in the wilderness with burial. And therefore they were considered defiled. They were not able to take care of to participate in the Passover. Verse 7, and those men said unto Moses, in other words, We are defiled by the dead body of a man, wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering of the Lord in his appointed season among the children of Israel. Verse 8, And Moses said unto them, Stand still, and I will hear what the Lord will command concerning you. And verse 9, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, so the Lord, God, spake unto Moses. So here he spoke in verse 1, and he spoke again in verse 9. And the Lord made provision for what would happen if, and under what circumstances would a person not participate in the Passover on the 14th day of the first month, and what provision would be made. So the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey afar off, yet he shall keep the Passover unto the Lord. The 14th day of the second month at even, they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. A month later. Not the 14th day of the first month, but the 14th day of the second month, allowing them time to cleanse themselves from defilement. And they shall leave none of it unto the morning, nor break any bone of it, according to all the ordinances of the Passover. They shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not in a journey, and forbears to keep the Passover, even the same soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering of the Lord in his appointed season. That man shall bear his sin. So the Lord spoke and provided for those who, due to other circumstances, being on a long journey or participating in burial rites of someone who died when they were close family members, that they could still keep the Passover a month later. So this was done back during Moses' time at Sinai. So this was God's provision. And let's read about a time that they did that, and then we're going to apply it to what happened with the disciples and Jesus at Passover. In 2 Chronicles chapter 30, there was provision made during Hezekiah's time of being king. Hezekiah sent to Israel and Judah, wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh that they should come to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem to keep the Passover. The king had taken counsel, and his princes and all the congregation in Jerusalem, to keep the Passover in the second month. Why did they do this? There were many reasons. It was a time when the Assyrians had attacked both the 10 tribes as well as the tribes of in Judah. And the 10 tribes were in the process of becoming no more of a kingdom, and here was Hezekiah providing for all of the needs of all the tribes in this. This was a God-led, inspired thing. And so there were some things that had happened. The priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently, neither had the people gathered themselves together at Jerusalem. And so they established a decree and made a proclamation throughout all Israel And they came to keep the Passover unto the Lord, and they had not done this for a long time in such sort as it was written. So the letters also included, this is the commandment of the king, and it said, Ye children of Israel, turn again unto the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and he will return to the remnant of you that are escaped out of the hand of the kings of Assyria. And if we apply this typology in our time, it would be escaping out of Babylon, would be one typology. And verse 7, And be not like your fathers, and like your brethren, which trespassed against the Lord God of their fathers, who therefore gave them up to desolation, as you see. And they had just witnessed this. Now be not stiff-necked as their fathers were, but yield yourselves unto the Lord, and enter into his sanctuary, which he has sanctified forever, and serve the Lord your God, that the fierceness of his wrath may turn away from you. Verse 9, And if you turn again unto the Lord your brethren, and your children shall find compassion before them, and lead them captive, so that they come again into this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and will not turn away his face from you if you return to him. So there were those who mocked from those tribes, from Ephraim and Manasseh and Zebulun, but then there were those also from various areas, diverse areas from Asher and Manasseh and Zebulun, who humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. Also in Judah, the hand of the Lord was to give them one heart to do the commandment. And there they assembled at Jerusalem much people to keep the feast of unleavened bread in the 2nd month, a very great congregation. And so they killed the Passover on the 14th day of the 2nd month. And the priests and the Levites together felt ashamed because they weren't ready the month before, but they sanctified themselves and they worked together. And it even was required, according to the law of Moses, that they made some provision where the priests were sprinkling the blood, but the sacrifices were the killing of the animals, of the lambs, were done by the Levites in verse 17, because everyone that was not clean to sanctify unto the Lord, even among the Levites and the priests, not everyone was ready for this, even by a month later. For a multitude of the people had not cleansed themselves, yet they did eat the Passover, as it was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, The good Lord pardon everyone. Verse 19, that prepared his heart. The good Lord pardon everyone that prepared his heart to seek God, the Lord God of his fathers, though he be not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary. And the Lord hearkened to Hezekiah and healed the people. So they were not rigid. They saw a time where mercy was needed. The people had so far forsaken God in worshiping idols. And here was a time when they came back and they didn't even remember or have knowledge to keep it 100% correctly. But the Lord hearkened to Hezekiah and healed the people and provided for their needs. So we come back to John chapter 13. Jesus knew that his hour was come at the feast of Passover. This feast pointed to the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross. And supper being ended, they had supper beforehand. And Judas had already prepared to reject Christ and to betray him. And Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, he rose from supper and laid aside his garments and took the towel for us. There was provision made, and this occurred after he had already said, "Take the cup and take the bread." So this is in Luke 22. I may not have time to read it all. But when the hour was come, Jesus sat down with the 12 apostles and said, "With desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. Study it out and pray this applies to us in our time."